What's up? My name is Glue Boy. Welcome back to the channel. And today we got, an obvious one. I talked about Vulkan last video, so today, his Legion, or chapter, the Salamanders, which I gotta say are definitely like the biggest bros when it comes to the actual Space Marines. Because these guys, pretty cool. I mean, they're master crafters and blacksmiths, they're humanitarians, and like pretty nice people, and also like they're massive pyromaniacs, but that's kind of separate. Which I will state, the Salamanders have a reputation of being, the good guys, the ones who just give out bear hugs and are super sweet and kind. They kind of are, I'll get into it, but like they're still in 40k. Cause like they're good, but they're like the Tau good. If you place them in a setting that isn't Warhammer 40k, they're the villains. Hands down. Toss them in like your Star Treks or your Star Wars or whatever. Like, horrible pieces of shit. In 40k, when you have to contend with shit like the Drukhari, Tyranids, the General Imperium, Chaos, like they're good in comparison. But actually, let's just get into that, because that's the first thing we're going to talk about when it comes to the Salamanders. Their actual reputation of being decent folk. Now, I'm not going to get into Vulkan. You can watch my previous video. I'm not going to retell that thing. But Vulkan, one of his primary tenets when it came to just leading war, was making sure that civilians were actually taken care of and not subjected to warfare. He wanted to limit civilian casualties as much as possible, which also led into one of their main tactical fighting styles. Salamanders are very slow and methodical in their approach. They don't like daring, rush in, daring do. They don't like that. They like to take things slow, bit by bit, and work their way to it with a purpose. And this also helps them lead massive humanitarian efforts, because when war comes and the Salamanders come down, shit's already really bad. So they also are leading the charge when it comes to evacuation orders, getting the ships all piled in full of civs in a hive world so they can fly out of there, so that the Orc War or Tyranid invasion that's coming down won't really have that much innocent people to chow down on or murder horribly. Instead, a bunch of salamanders waiting for them. Which this forms one of the salamanders' core beliefs. That being that they are the protectors of humanity, and that it is their job to protect the citizens of the Imperium. The salamanders are hosted on the planet of Nocturne, and their main headquarters is on its moon Prometheus. And they actually are pretty connected with the people on Nocturne, including their families. Now you see, normal Space Marines are taken in at the age of like 8 to 12-ish, young enough that they can get all the implants and augments. And essentially, the moment they're taken as a recruit, they're basically dead to their family. They're never going to see them again. They're becoming an Astartes that's going to go through a lot of training, culture, like re-education stuff. And basically their past life is just a kind of a distant memory. And even more, Astartes don't like die of old age. They'll die in combat. So they live to like hundreds and hundreds of years old. So most likely, especially with extra warp travel and stuff, their parents are just going to be dead. However, on Nocturne, they are actually very associated with the settlements they hail from. A lot of the actual full-blown salamanders are like leader and elder figures of the settlements. And salamanders are given military leave to go spend time with their families when they're not like deployed out in war. Which is insane and actually really interesting. Because the main thing this does is gives the salamanders a very special view when it comes to humanity. As they see humanity, they integrate with regular people, they're like friends, family, loved ones, like they have people they care about. And then you compare that to a lot of the other Space Marines who have this very holier than thou, better than you attitude, largely because like their reputation of being the angels of death, literally the angels of the Emperor, or just the fact that they're so augmented they are just a step above normal people. So having this special view on what humanity is gives them that edge of just being kind of cool. And to give even more shit, the actual recruitment process for a salamander, one, it's really slow and methodical, but a primary thing is it's actually relatively safe compared to the others. Because first things first, a new salamander recruit is basically serving as a blacksmith aide to a full-on Space Marine. Because they're all master crafters, they augment their own armor, they build their own weapons, all that stuff. They do all that, and they're learning that from a very young age. which then eventually they're brought in as an actual Space Marine aspirant. They're given their trials, which is a safer version of the contest that the Emperor and Vulkan did way back in the day. And then eventually, if you actually succeed all that, boom, you're a Salamander. And if you fail, you're most likely not going to be dead, because they're going to make sure you don't get killed in the process. And instead you get to serve as a chapter serf, which is essentially a personal steward to a Space Marine, and you get to help the Salamander chapter in a non-combat role, which not every Legion does, not every chapter does, because it's kind of an antiquated concept, and a lot of Space Marines don't want regular people mucking about in their ships. But the Salamanders have it, so then those who really want to serve the Emperor and serve the Imperium get a chance to do so without being murdered horribly, because they're just guys. Which, touching back on that blacksmithing part, the Salamanders actually are master crafters, like I've said. And all of their weapons and armor, while they're, like every Space Marine, given to them by the Mechanicus, they specially augment and tailor and repair their own equipment. All of that is by them. And this allows them, even the really, really talented ones, to have master crafted weaponry, which they primarily use to create flame weapons, which I gotta say is kind of funny when you compare it to them being humanitarians. Because, when I think of low civilian casualties, I think of flamethrowers. That's primarily the weapon of choice. They got, your flamers, which are flamethrowers. You got your meltas, which shoot a superheated beam of plasma. It's as hot as the sun right at something. And then your fire lances that Vulkan Histan has, and this is a very special spear. I'll get on it later. That's primarily their main shit. They love their flame weaponry, and that's them on the tabletop too. They got a lot of just bonuses to flame stuff. And just really nice armor. They're some tanky motherfuckers. And all their armors is specially crafted to be more durable. So if you want your very tanky Space Marines that aren't Death Guard, Salamanders are kind of the one for you. And then next thing, I want to talk about the Salamander Gene Seed, because it's kind of interesting in the aspect that the Gene Seed is noted to be very unique in that it's completely untainted and uncorrupted. That's not to say that there aren't mutations that come about with this, or any traits from Vulkan that come down, because that always happens for every Gene Seed, even the ones that are pretty safe, like the Dark Angels. They have no actual flaws, but they still get traits from, the line. As it be with DNA imbuement. But it gets extra fucky because the Salamanders were created in a trio of super secret legions. That being them, Salamanders, the Space Wolves, and the Alpha Legion. All three of these were kept separate from each other and every other legion, created with no one else's knowledge. And created for a purpose we just don't know. We don't know why Big E did this, we don't know why he kept them secret, and we don't know what their actual intentions were, because it was very clear they were meant to have some very super specific role. I mean, the Alpha Legion are super secret, special operatives, infiltration. The Space Wolves are very, internal affairs, because they're the ones who, the Emperor's executioner and all that with Lehman Russ. But then the Salamanders don't really have a role, at least not a major one. I think at least you can make an argument that their job is, again, civilian relief and humanitarian efforts, at least with their original incarnation. Because at least, Vulkan was pretty predisposed to being a decent, nice dude. So maybe that was their role the entire time, who knows. That being said, the Gene Seed still leaves them with some changes. Mainly in the cosmetic sense, because all Salamanders have jet black skin and burning red eyes. Which actually, these burning red eyes, despite being terrifying, because glowing red eyes kind of spooky for everybody. But these actually give them a form of heat sense. Without special equipment, Salamanders can actually sense heat signatures and hone in on them just with their normal eyesight. Kind of handy, especially when their entire shit is heat based, which actually, extra little fun detail, Salamanders will augment their armor to give off very particular heat signatures to make it so their friends can track them easier. That's fun, cool use of that power. But Salamanders have one debuff, as they have a much slower reaction time when compared to all the other Space Marine chapters. Now that is to say, they still have Space Marine reaction speed and all of that. They're still, Astartes, but their reaction time is just a little bit slower. and it's undetermined if this is a gene seed flaw, like the only one they might have, or if this is just an element of their tactics, and Nocturne being a very gravity-dense planet, and just, you know, with gravity weighing down on you at all times, it's just harder to react as quick. Who knows? Just kind of, it's up in the air. And then the last thing, I have my phone here to make sure I get things exact on this front, because names and direct quotes kind of fuck me up a little bit. So we gotta talk about the artifacts of Vulkan, because now that Vulkan is in whatever vanished space that he currently is waiting for a revive, he has a bit of a treasure hunt set up for his boys, at least the ones that think this will do it. Now, there are a bunch of artifacts of Vulkan. In fact, there was a giant vault that was just full of really cool shit that Vulkan made, and they're now all destroyed, except for 9 of them. And the Salamanders believe if they find all 9 of these like relics and bring them together, Vulkan will return. And we have, 5 of them that we actually know the location of and are recovered. So we actually know what they do and all of that. And then there are 4 unknown ones. We have the names and then just a brief description. But let's go over the found ones real quick. Just to go over them real quick, first up we have the Chalice of Fire, which is a giant forge ship. Which, I mean, it's what it sounds. It's a salamander, like, big battle barge with, like, Vulkan's, like, really nice custom-made forge that is, like, so hot, standard, like, metals just get destroyed in it. And originally mounted on said ship, we had the Eye of Vulkan, which is an insanely powerful laser weapon, like, that can take out a Space Marine battle barge, like, in one shot. And that's to say, battle barges are fucking massive. That is a ridiculously strong weapon and is currently on Nocturne, as it is part of the orbital defenses of the planet. And then we got a bit of a triple shot, since all of these are wielded by the current chapter master, Vulkan Histon. Absolute Chad, by the way. This guy rules. But let's just go through them real quick. First up, we have the Spear of Vulkan. It's a flaming spear that is so hot that it can burn through ceramite and ignite metals into flame. Which I gotta say, as a man with a very basic understanding of chemistry and physics, metal just bursting into flame, kinda nuts. I understand that's a very difficult thing to do. Then we have Kezere's Mantle, hope I'm saying that right, which is a cloak made of fire drake scales that is basically a storm shield, but like a cape. A storm shield being able to like block a lot of shit and defend you, and now you just got it on your back, so I guess you can't get backstabbed or shot in the back. Handy for Vulkan Histon. And then we have the Gauntlet of the Forge, which is a gauntlet, and it has a giant flamer on the bottom of it, which is just stronger than a standard heavy flamer. It's just a ridiculous hand flamer. Very basic. You know what? Happy Vulkan designs very straightforward weaponries for, well, I guess himself. And now Vulkan Histon is a very cool like equipment list. But now we get to the 4 mysterious ones, which I will just read verbatim. First, we have the Engine of Woes, whose wrath has never been unleashed. The Obsidian Chariot, whose has armor that is absolutely impenetrable. We have the Song of Entropy, which is a drake-headed staff that produces an entropic beam and no defense can resist. I wonder if the Obsidian Chariot could resist the Song of Entropy. Unstoppable force versus the immovable object. And then lastly, this one's a little interesting. The Unbound Flame, a device both terrible and wondrous, which is also the inscription, the Unbound Flame, on Vulkan's casket. Obviously there's no body remaining of him, but that's just like their little, ritualistic funeral for him. So there's a theory that maybe this final relic is actually Vulkan, which would be kind of interesting to say the least, because maybe you need all 8 to get the final 9th, like who knows? And to be honest, this is also kind of feeling like the real treasure was the friends we made along the way type beat, which for everything I've seen people criticize this treasure hunty aspect of the Salamanders, like this seems pretty Vulkan as like a method of banding his sons together so they're all connected and united by the time he makes his way back from wherever he is. Who knows? Personally, I think it's very fun. It's kind of nice to have just a central goal for the chapter so they're not just aimlessly going about killing aliens. But anyways, that's going to wrap this up. If you like this, like, comment, subscribe, do that stuff. Join my membership, and see ya.